Hi everyone and welcome back to Across the Gridiron. I am Matt and I am once again joined by this week who told me at the weekend through slightly salty tears that deep down he knew Micah Parsons was too good to be a Cowboy for long. Eddie, how you doing, my friend?
Listen, don't set me off right now, right? Because it's been a difficult weekend. As all Cowboy fans, must be feeling some kind of emotion, that ranges from um either sadness, desperation, anger, annoyance, frustration. There is all, it's like, this animation that they do for kids. What's it called? The one that the characters are emotions.
Oh, Inside
Uh
Out.
Inside Out, yes.
See, I just thought when you were going through all those emotions, I just thought you were talking about our Saturday nights out when we were in our twenties.
Well,
Certainly a lot of frustration and sadness and depression and all that kind of thing.
tell me about it. But welcome to the Across the Gridiron, guys, and don't forget, guys, to hit that like and subscribe button. And we do appreciate all of you that keep coming back to our quirky content. Because you're here not because it is very serious. If you want serious NFL news, you know where to go. But if you want a bit of craziness, a bit of not expecting what we're gonna say next, definitely this is a channel that you want.
Yeah, if
Um,
if you if you want to hear two guys talking nonsense or one guy waxing poetically about the Cowboys for 20 minutes, this is definitely the podcast for you. But look, Eddie, we are going to save Cowboys Corner for later in the podcast because we knew
yes,
that if we started this now, we will probably be talking till about midnight. So we
this
don't
is
want to
true.
do that yet. So we're just going to keep it quite simple this week. We're going to have just two parts this week. We're gonna kick things off, and we're going to talk about the Hall of Fame game, and
Yeah,
then in part two we'll be back and we will talk about the big sort of trade news, certainly the one close to Eddie's heart, which is of course Micah Parsons and the update from last week, because obviously spent a lot of time talking about it last week. So this week we will talk about the update that he's now asked for a trade, but more on that to come. I'm the bad guy. I'm the, I'm the, I'm the. So the season has officially started, Eddie.
it,
The 2025 season is underway because last weekend we had the Hall of Fame game with the LA Chargers taking on the Detroit Lions. With the final score with Chargers beating the Lions 34-7. Now, Eddie, I know you are an absolute lunatic. Did you actually watch this live or did you catch up with it after the fact?
do you know what? I started watching it
Of
live.
course you did. Of course you
I,
did.
and then I said to myself, what the heck am I doing? This is the Hall of Fame. The excitement of the NFL got to me, right? Because it's like, finally football has come, right? It's no longer speculating, who's draft player, who's done this, who's done that. Actual football, touchdowns, celebrations, interceptions. And boy, the Hall of Fame gave everything like that. And I know people, it's the Hall of Fame game. It means nothing unless you're Trey Lance, right?
Well, yeah, I was going to say there was certainly one team who was celebrating turnovers and touchdowns, and that was not the Detroit Lions.
No.
So, yeah, so the LA Chargers won this game 34-7. Now, I think there is a tendency to potentially overanalyze
Hmm.
the game because it is the first game that we've really seen in anger
Yeah.
since the Super Bowl. Um, and I suppose that, but again, we had a lot of second strings out there, a lot of third strings out there, a lot of this is where you kind of find out more about next guy up, really. I say rather than actually the guys who are going to be starting the season in anger
Yeah.
in a few weeks' time. But you've already mentioned him, so let's just jump straight into it.
Yeah.
If there was one individual winner in this game, it was the Chargers quarterback Trey Lance.
Yeah.
Now, here is a guy who has, let's say, he hasn't quite lived up to the hype that came because he was a first round draft pick for the 49ers. Could never get past Garoppolo, and then he was certainly superseded by Brock Purdy. Spent last season as backup for your beloved Dallas Cowboys when he spent most of his time battling for the second place with Cooper Rush. Now, so none of those teams worked out. This season, he's been brought in as a free agent by the LA Chargers. And I think the one thing that I think is guaranteed after the latter, he has certainly taken that second string quarterback. He's sort of nailed that position to his own.
Yeah,
Um, Beating out is it Taylor Heineke, isn't it? Who's the other quarterback
it
in
is.
LA.
Yeah,
But he really stole the show. I think he did incredibly well. He went 13 for 20, 120 yards, two touchdowns. Easy for me to say. Eddie, what did you think of Trey Lance coming after the game? Certainly after being a former Cowboy, of course.
Um, yeah, Trey Lance, I like the guy. He's a good-looking guy. He didn't get a lot of opportunities in San Francisco and in Dallas, and it's a curious one, right? Because San Francisco, they traded up, to go get him. And so it is baffling, right? So you kind of, talk about players going into the right system. And we've talked about that a few times, on this podcast that, sometimes players go to a team, and we saw this with Sam Darnold, kept bouncing around and then went to the Vikings and then shut up. And then Baker Mayfield, right? You see what's happening in Tampa Bay Buccaneers. People are talking about him as one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the league
Hmm.
right now.
Hmm.
And you never understand whether a lot of it is the player themselves or is the coaching and the system around them. So Trey Lance went to San Francisco, and I guess there is a urgency about San Francisco because everybody said that their Super Bowl window was right wide open, right? So they got very close. So if you're a quarterback in San Francisco, nobody's wanting you to come in and be learning, right? And they're expecting you to come in and do what most of the other quarterbacks do, which is play within Kyle Shanahan's system and do exactly what he wants you to do and get to the Super Bowl. And maybe that wasn't what Trey Lance as a quarterback is the sort of quarterback is. Maybe he's the kind of quarterback that needs a little bit more expression, not playing within a system. So maybe that didn't work. I mean, Brock Purdy came and he just executed Kyle Shanahan's plan to perfection, right? And there was nothing better than a coach having that kind of person as a quarterback. And this is not a Brock Purdy show because we saw what happened to him last season, so we won't go into that. So then he goes to Dallas, and the Dallas, trade was a very strange one because it felt like, and before we start digressing into that, I'm trying to control myself.
Yeah, please don't
Um,
spend too much time talking about Dallas. That will come. That will come.
but it was a strange one because it felt like they did it as a negotiation tactics, to put pressure on Dak Prescott. Oh, we go get another trade and fourth round. We trade for a fourth round pick for another quarterback. Dak Prescott was a fourth round pick, and we're kind of like, okay, let's see, if Trey Lance can, play it out pressure. Well, it didn't work. Dak Prescott got 60 million, and Trey Lance rarely got on the field, right? Because he had Cooper Rush, who was there and understood the Dallas system and won games. And so Trey Lance now free agent, you're thinking, what's next for the guy? Where can he potentially go to? Um, and then I don't think I would have thought about the Chargers as a landing spot for Trey Lance because, everyone has got Justin Herbert there. And if you're looking at backup quarterbacks, there are so many in the league right now, so you wouldn't immediately think about a backup quarterback in Trey Lance who's hardly played any games. You're looking at the Taylor Heineke, you're looking at, the Joe Flacco's, the guys that have played multiple games, in the league as your backup. So I was very curious to see what Trey Lance was going to do. And I think that he couldn't have done himself any more favors with the way that he played. And when I watch these preseason games, I'm always looking at the first half of the game, sort of, the first couple of, plays from the quarterback, because, sometimes they put in the starters for a drive. They'll put them for one or two drives. So you might get the starting offensive line, you might get the real running back and all of that. And the defense, you might get some starters, certainly people that most likely maybe have played first team football before. And just seeing the way he approached the game, how he was making the passes, comes out, throws for a couple of passes, gets a few yards down the field. He was always showing as if he was going to run or going to play the run, and then he was passing. And, Aaron Rodgers said this. One of his podcasts with Pat McAfee, that quarterbacking, is a lot more than just the throwing of the ball. It's about what you do, on the line of scrimmage, how you, adjust pre-snap, post-snap, what you do when you make off script plays, when you're trying to throw to someone and he's covered and you have to change and throw to somebody else. And Trey Lance was throwing on the run. He was coming out of the pocket, he was staying in the pocket, he was doing lots of different things, and I thought to myself, okay, I don't know who this guy is, but he's certainly looking like a competent quarterback. And when I look at the preseason, I always look at either first team players, rookies, and it gives me a feel of the ones who are close to being ready. So last season, before it started, I was talking about Bo Nix and Jaden Daniel because I watched the preseason games. I saw the way they played. I saw how calm they looked. Because even though you're playing against backups, these are players who want to start. So they play hungry, they play aggressive. No one is like dragging their feet because they are backups, right? They're only backups because we don't know them, right? And there are lots of players that have made their name from preseason and gone on to be starters. You can talk about, players, in the Chiefs, right? When you talk about Rasheed Rice, he played in preseason game, did some good stuff, and you're like, oh, okay. Puka Nakua played in preseason game, showed flashes, and then went on to become a starter. So there are a lot of those guys that play this preseason game that you might eventually see as starters. And Trey Lance, for me, looked composed, so happy he threw no interception because even if it's against backups, if you throw an interception, people are going to be like, whoa, what's going on there? Um,
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we'll touch on that when we talk about the Lions shortly. But I think that obviously they try to obviously set it up to, I think Harbour has basically set the team up to try and lower and mitigate the risk of turnovers, and
mm,
I think that that's something that Lance really took on board. He made the simple pass where maybe there was a deeper, more sort of Hollywood pass available. He was cool, calm, and collected. He
yeah,
did what he needed to be done. And to be honest, I think the main thing is that when you lose your first choice quarterback, and we've seen it happen. We saw it happen a lot with Miami last year when Tua went down. The person who step up, you need to be able to trust them,
yeah,
right? And I think that's what Trey Lance did, right? So he didn't do anything spectacular, shall we
yeah,
say? He
yeah,
wasn't, launching Hail Mary, Hail Mary, doing
yes,
80-yard passes every
yeah,
every every drive. But he did the simple things effectively. He did some really good passes. He caught some really good plays that resulted in a win, right?
yeah, yeah,
And the reason why they won this game, and we may as well jump to talk about it now, is they won the turnover battle.
they did.
They won it 5-0.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think when they asked at the end of the game, Dan Campbell basically said, right, first one out the gate, we lost the ball 5 times, didn't take any takeaways. That's why we lost. and
it,
and it's like, well, yeah, so like, well, yeah, that is why. And you look at the other side, we talk about quarterbacks. The quarterbacks who played for the Lions
yeah,
in this game was Kyle Allen and Hendon Hooker.
yeah,
Obviously, they're
backups.
bad. They're battling for the backup to Jared Goff.
Yeah,
Neither of them did themselves any favors at all.
no,
I feel Kyle Allen did a really bad turnover that almost led to a pick six.
yeah,
Hooker didn't look particularly great when he came on either. So switching back to Lance quickly, the fact that he came in, did the simple things, did them really effectively, looked like he can lead that particular team. That
mm,
he's not going to take Herbert's place yet, right?
no,
But if Herbert does pick up an injury or pick up loss of form, which we don't think he will. I mean, I talked quite a bit about the Chargers when we were doing our previews. I
Yeah.
think they're certainly a dark horse in their division this season because predominantly of someone like Herbert. But if he does drop, then I think Lance could see his opportunity, and we've seen that happen up and down the leagues over the past couple of years. What backup quarterbacks can do.
Yeah, and listen, right? Lance, he missed some throws, right? I think he
Of
missed a
course.
couple of throws in the end zone, and he even said, something that he needs to work on. And his offensive coordinator said something like, good practice usually equals good game. So clearly he's been putting in a lot of work, in training camp. He's been showing a lot of things that, people are looking for. And maybe, for one, he's realizing that he's just got another opportunity right now. And if he doesn't take it, he could be out of the league soon. And the NFL is that brutal, when it
Mhm.
comes to especially quarterbacks. If you don't get a chance to show what you can do, you know, then, all of a sudden people stop looking at you because they're like 4 years, 5 years in the league, and you still haven't started a number of games. So if for one thing that this does is that if he plays well again, I fully expect him to start the next preseason game. And I hope he does well. I think this preseason game is going to be an opportunity for him to really, really solidify this first look. And if he plays well in the next two preseason games, what that does is that he opens up the range of other teams that could potentially look at him as a backup, right? So you've got, players like Joe Flacco who are 40, who are going out of the league very soon. You can imagine this is their, last, run in the NFL. Aaron Rodgers has already said that this is his last run in the NFL. So you've got two quarterbacks that are going to open up spots, in the NFL in two teams, right? You can look across the league and you see lots of other, quarterbacks. I mean, they had to go pull out, what's his name now? And that used to be the quarterback for the Vikings. His name jumps in my head and then disappears. He was coaching in, I think it was even college. I'm not sure it was college, but they basically asked him to come and, quarterback. I think it was for the Panthers.
Oh, it was
Um, what's his name now? Yeah,
I can't remember now.
he was very good in the Vikings until he had an injury, and then that kind of derailed, his career in the NFL. But they're calling people out from the bench, and saying, come and play with us. So, you would imagine that there will be a lot of teams who would, you know, experiment with their rookies and might find one or two rookies that might not be able to, you know, um, they're not up to speed to the NFL. And so they might be looking for backups, to come in and take the spot. So I think Trey Lance has done himself, a world of good, in terms of that position as a backup. With more games, more composure, people will think, okay, maybe he can run offense. And the NFL is teams are desperate for good quarterback play, right? Everyone is thinking, oh, we've got the one until they get them in game time, and then you're watching the quarterback on the other field, and you're thinking, "No, I haven't got one."
Yeah, well, absolutely. But the one thing I will just piss on your chip slightly is that they've already confirmed it's going to be Heineke's going to start the next game against next preseason game.
Have they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So because he didn't get any action in the game
No,
the other day. So
no, he didn't. It's a shame. It's a shame for Trey Lance. I mean, we know what we're gonna get from Henneke, right? So what are they looking for? This is the frustration for me sometimes. It's like you've got a good thing, but sometimes you wonder whether teams are playing this bit of politics, right? Right. They want to calm everyone down before fans start clamoring for Trey Lance. Let's say Justin Herbert has a bad game or something, and people start saying, "Oh, you need to put Lance in if he has two consecutive good games." I think that crosses teams, minds when they do
I
these things.
I wouldn't read too much into that. I think from the amount of snaps that he's got over the course in training camps, it's clear that at the moment Lance is going to be the second choice, and Heineke will be third string, but they've still got to play him. In the
Yeah.
course of these pieces, they have to play him. You sort of, we said that Lions play their second and third string quarterback. So I think it's one of these things. But look, we've already talked quite a bit now. So let's just move on a little bit. Let's just talk. Maybe let's have like 5 minutes on the Lions.
Yeah.
Wasn't a great showing for them. We
No.
talked about the number of takeaways. Is there anything that we can read into this, or is it just a case of it's a preseason game? Things go wrong. It happens. Turnovers were key. Few plays did well. Few played well and put themselves in a shout to start. A lot didn't. Where do you anything of the sort of immediate concerns on the Lions? Anything to take out of
No.
that?
No, not really. I mean, Patriots used to do this notoriously. You watch the preseason, they lose most of them, and then they start the season and go on to the Super Bowl. So sometimes the preseason is more about, shaking your squad because they still have to whittle down from 90 to 56, right? So you're trying to get rid of players. As bad as it sounds, that's pretty much what you're doing. The prison is almost like a filter. Let's shake all the ones that are not so good out, and let's have players that we're thinking about maybe put in a practice squad, maybe do the roster gymnastics, and all of that, have them hanging around and things like that. So for the Lions, they're not going to be losing any sleep over this game, right?
No.
So they're gonna be like, okay, we tried a couple of things, probably didn't work as much. Okay, maybe they didn't execute as well, but it'll be plays that they would try here that they'll think, okay, is it more the players that were on the field that the plays didn't work? Should we try it again in the next preseason game? So no, nobody likes to lose and lose that way. You 34-7 is still a clunky.
Well, it
But
started badly when they they turned over the ball in the very first
in the
play
very
of
first play,
the
yeah.
in the kick return. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't read too much into it. As I said, turnovers was the problem, right?
Yeah.
And the two quarterbacks didn't really do their cause any good to
Yeah.
the backup, but
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
are they are the clear backup to Jared Goff. If something was to happen to Goff for a longer period of time, then I think these two guys didn't show they can step up for any sort of longer period of time. But
Yeah.
it's preseason.
It, it is.
This is
It
what
is
happens.
preseason. It's preseason. The one other thing I'll say finally on that is maybe the Lions might be thinking we need a backup quarterback. Um,
Maybe, but as I said, I think if Goff goes down for
oh,
any length of time, I think someone could be looking for a trade.
ooh.
But if Goff, if he's going to play 16, 17 games a season, then I
Did
don't think, and
did
plus the playoffs, then I think
did
they don't need
did,
him.
did someone say Shador Sanders? Somewhere.
Hey, well, I mean,
Just, just,
the situation at Browns continues to amaze, but let's park that for another for another week. Okay, so look, we will be back. That'll do for part one. We'll be back in part two, where we sit down, we grab a cup of tea, and we fully enter and embrace Cowboys Corner. We'll be back in part two.
Thank you for tuning to this episode of Across the Gridiron.
So, for more NFL related news, insights, and somewhat outlandish Cowboys opinion and rants, please leave a comment or hit like and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification button so you never miss a video of any of our nonsense.
And we'll be back soon at Across the Gridiron.